We all experience emotions, but some men are just shit scared of them because they just think they're going to lose control, so they're going to suppress it. So you work with men mostly. I'm curious when and how you start conversations with the men you're coaching about their emotions. Do you bring that in the first 2 minutes, or do you wait a bit? What's your methodology? How do you bring it in? How do you broach that subject? Welcome to the podcast that guides men to demystify and develop their intuition. I'm your host, Doug Beitz. Let's dig into the science and expand your horizons. My guest today, Charles Browne, is a men's personal development coach, helping men break free from self-doubt, overthinking, and people-pleasing. A certified nice guy coach and the author of The Pursuit of Identity and Purpose. Charles has guided over 200 men to build unshakable self-worth, set strong boundaries, and take control of their lives. His coaching blends behavioural psychology, leadership principles, and peak performance strategies to help men become the grounded, decisive leaders their lives demand. Charles, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Very, very happy to be here.
Good. So I've read that in your background, you've got nuclear engineering, fast attack submarines, you've been on and stuff like that. Tell us a bit more about that.
Actually, I joined the Navy after high school. Wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my life, but the Navy had this really great program, if you qualify for it, which is their naval nuclear power program. And so a big part of their fleet, aircraft carriers, missile cruisers, and their entire submarine fleet now is nuclear powered. So they can maintain their own qualification and training program internal to the Navy. So that was the thing that kind of hooked me in. And I spent about a year and a half or so in school learning all about the engineering before I was deployed to my first fast attack submarine, and then subsequently served on two others after that. Yeah.
Wow. I know years ago I used to have a little scuba resort up north of the equator, sort of between Guam and Hawaii. And we get a few guys from Guam, the Air Force base there, come down for R&R, some scuba diving
Mhm.
for a week and that sort of thing. And one guy I talked to was in the Navy, and he joined very young, and he's after X amount of time, he's in a submarine and he's on his first mission heading off. And I don't know whether they went, I'm assuming they went past the North Pole and, in that area. And he says, we're under the ice, and they've announced to everyone, okay, we're going to break through the ice with this submarine and, out, and we've got to do some research here for a day or something like that or whatever. And, said the first time we hit it, it was slightly at the wrong angle and it was probably a little thicker than they'd planned. So they bounced off it, and then, they hit it again and came up through it, and like crazy sort of stuff. And
Yep,
he was always telling us
absolutely.
like he could never let any of his friends or family know where they were. He said occasionally we were in places where we probably they were where they were supposed to be, but governments may not have appreciated them being where they were, so they were. So we were never allowed to say where we were or things like that.
Right.
And yeah, for life, like
Yeah, being away from home port is one thing. Being on patrol or on station is something completely separate. I don't describe those dates. You don't describe those locations. You don't describe those durations whatsoever. That's all very top secret. But once you do come off station or come off patrol and you pull into Italy or Haifa, Israel or something like that, yeah, that's when we would, hey, it's me. How long has it been? I have no concept of time whatsoever. Well, we haven't heard from you in 9 weeks. Okay, it's been 9 weeks. I'm okay. Click, kind of a quick heartbeat back to your family. And there are, two different types of submarines. Of course, there's fast attack, and that's typically a very volatile, unpredictable schedule. And then the ballistic missile submarines, which actually have two crews. So the boat itself is constantly on patrol, and it only comes into port to drop off the people and get a new set of people and go back out. And they tend to do that in 90-day increments. Yeah.
right. Fast attack, does that mean like it can travel fast underwater, but can it do that for long distances, or is it a short distance thing?
The weakest link in a submarine is the crew. Those particular models of reactor on submarines can operate for years and years and years. And the submarine itself makes its own clean water. That's sufficient to keep the reactor running and keep it cooled and make up for any losses that it might have. So the weakest link on a submarine are the human beings on board, because
Yeah.
otherwise the systems would just run continuously forever.
So when can it run, when can a submarine travel the fastest? If it's on the surface or if it's submerged? And what's max cruising speed that you would do? Not allowed to say?
Yeah, you could Google that, maybe ask Jane's Ships and see what's released. It probably says a greater than a certain number of knots, but I would default to Jane's on that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Whereas, yeah. And are they traveling faster than a ship on the surface? Like, one of your,
No. So what a goofy little distinction. A submarine is a boat, and surface ships are ships. The difference between a boat and a ship is a keel. Submarine doesn't have a keel, so it's literally a tube. So when you're on the surface, you're not designed to be on the surface. Very
yeah.
unstable on the
Yeah.
surface. Three dimensionally, it's very unstable on the surface. So not exactly screaming along, pulling skiers or anything like that. No.
Gotcha. And at depth, are there ocean currents down there that would start to sway you around a bit as well?
No, I mean, if you maintain momentum, it's very stable. So
Right.
we're all very happy when we get to a safe depth to dive because, again, you're talking about this tube. So underwater, oh, it's very stable, very calm. So,
Yeah, and I guess it's a bit like when I used to scuba dive. If we were sitting on the surface, a choppy day, we'd have our mask and regulator in, and you're chopping around, bouncing. And I remember taking some well, I'm a scuba instructor, and so you'd be taking some new students down on a day like that, and the visibility would be incredible under the water where we were. But the surface, there might be like 3 or 4 foot chop, and we're holding on to the anchor line like
yeah,
with the new divers, we've got to take them down very slow to get
right,
used to
right.
like the
Yep.
pressurizing their ears and things. And some of them are just at that point they're going like, I can't do this. Let me back on the boat. And I just trust me. Just go down. If we get down 6 feet and you don't want to do this anymore, like get them down 6 feet and you're swaying around a lot less and the serenity starts to come in and then they're like, oh, give you the okay sign, yeah, I'm okay. And then you get them down sort of 15 feet, 20 feet, and they're like, oh, okay. That then you bring them back up and then chopping around the surface trying to get them back in the boat again. It's that transition between the two worlds. And I've talked about this on my podcast quite a bit where I have issues with that, even though I'm a scuba instructor. And I'm fine on the surface with you can snorkel and all that, and I can float around out there all day. But if I'm out of my depth on a choppy ocean like that, and I've got no mask, snorkel, or fins, I'm not a happy camper. I can tell you, like, not my
Yeah.
scene. And I'm trying to work on overcoming that because I live not far from the ocean. And it's, yeah, fear that I have
Mhm.
had my whole life. And it's like, I've got to conquer this one. I'll go and swim out in the waves and body surf and catch waves in because it's always pushing you back to shore. But
Right,
it's
right.
that I've got to get my big boy pants on and head out the back and swim around out there for a while and then swim back in. And
Yeah, do some open water.
I've got some more than adequate help lined up to do that, like the charts level help, but it's just my overcoming. And so I've been working on my swim fitness to help psychologically that I can do this in a pool. I can do it, and
Yep.
yes, yeah. So I get it that once you're down there, and when we used to drift dive around the island, and we would get down, and there'd be a current, and it would be taking you in one direction, and we would just go with it, and it'd be
Absolutely.
smooth as, and you'd look up from your feet down, and there'd be like an 8 foot chop because you'd be at this real gnarly point, and you'd be like, oh geez, and you'd look at your air, and you go, okay, good, we got another 30 minutes, we'll drift way past this bit, and it'll be a lot calmer when we come up, but
Yeah.
yeah, transitions. So we talked the other day about, the training that you do. You talk about helping people remain calm and things like that through training that you've had in the Navy and elsewhere. You had training to do that as well.
Some of my background, I didn't realize it was training at the time, but I started studying martial arts when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And I didn't really realize it at the time. Of course, you're really focused on the physical. You're not paying too close attention to the mental or the emotional. But that type of training as well, I think the analogy that I shared was my sensei, my instructor, kind of this street lamp kind of mentality, which is if someone's been legs length away, that's green light. You're perfectly fine. Nothing to worry about. It's going to take them seconds to get in close enough to do any harm with you. That's a green zone. You're fine. Nothing to worry about. They move in a little closer where you could reach you with one action, one activity, one large kick or one large lunge. That's kind of yellow zone. Time to start paying attention. Maybe take your hands out of your pockets, right? Minimize your target a little bit. And then obviously when someone is within hand's reach, that's a red zone. You better be paying attention. You better have your guard up and you better be ready to react. So I didn't realize it, but as a young kid, I was being conditioned to recognize green, yellow, red. And had some trauma in my home life, and there was a lot of uncertainty in my home life, and I didn't realize but that was also a green, yellow, red. My sisters and I could hear what was going on in the house, and that's okay. This one will blow over. Oh, this one's starting to sound pretty bad, and it comes up right. So you kind of start to break those things down into zones. And by the time I joined the Navy and I was put through this program, and the first time I was put on a live operating nuclear reactor to run drills, I wasn't really very shakeable because I had a clear understanding. So there's two parts to this, right? There's that piece that I just described, which is that emotional kind of confidence in myself and in my decision making, knowing how quickly I can respond and how I can react. And then there's the technical, which is if something does happen, do I feel confident in my abilities to address it? So we can talk about that in any facet of our life. In my relationship, am I confident enough in how I understand my partner and myself so that if we move from green to yellow, I can respond? If things move from yellow to red, do I understand my feelings and my actions? Am I in control of my own emotions enough and my responses actually enough that I can confidently respond to this? So there's kind of pieces of that, which is, do I have control of my own state? Am I reactive? Am I reacting or am I responding? Different. And then there is absolutely a technical piece of that. Have I practiced enough to be able to defend myself? Have I studied enough to understand what the different temperatures, pressures, and indicators mean to me?
Mm. So, is there any way that you think that you could tie intuition into that? Like you feel that you've had intuitive moments through all those experiences as a child through to the Navy and beyond?
My personal opinion and take and definition of intuition is always there. Intuition is always speaking to us. And intuition to me is that the entire volume of the database that is between our ears of all our experiences in life, and then emotional response, and which I think varies for each of us because some of us are a little more risk tolerant than others, right? And so we have a little bit different response time or a little bit different response intensity that's based on our personal experience. But I believe that every bit of that is a function of that intuition. And I'm happy to talk about this because my framework around intuition is that's the highest form of intelligence as far as I'm concerned, because intuition is what takes that technical training, that real world experience, and then our emotional lens on how we feel about that, and then putting it in the context of our current situation. And that happens, at the speed of emotion, right? Just absolutely imperceptibly fast. And so, as I make decisions through life, the quality of my decisions have improved when I've been able to understand that intuition is giving me a signal and understanding where it's coming from. Is the intuition setting off a yellow alarm or a red alarm based on what? Is it my emotional response? Is my lack of confidence in that moment? Do I need to study more? What's going on here?
All right, so you work with men mostly, I'm assuming from what I read. And likewise, I'm curious when and how you start conversations with the men you're coaching about their like emotions. Like, how do you bring that in the first 2 minutes, or do you wait a bit? Like some men, we all experience emotions, but some men are just shit scared of them because they just think they're going to lose control, so they're going to suppress it. What's your methodology? How do you bring it in? How do you broach that subject? Because it's so important.
Yeah, this is what I believe is the art part of coaching. I spend a lot of time reading and researching and understanding human psychology and behavioral dynamics and all that, right? That's the textbook stuff of it. That doesn't tell you how to coach someone. So the art of coaching is, why are you here? Right? It starts with that simple question. Hey, thank you so much for scheduling this call. Here's a couple things you need to know about what we're talking. So tell me a little bit about yourself and tell me why you scheduled this call. That's the most important piece when you're talking to anybody, whether it's a coaching client or just a friend who, hey man, you got time to come out for a pint? Like, why did you want to come out? Right? That you need to know what their motivation was and because if a guy asks for help or if a guy has finally reached out and said, hey, we talk about something for a minute, this is DEF CON, right? Like
Gone
something,
down.
that's right. Something's been brewing for a long time. As a coach, what's most important to me, and I believe what should be most important to all coaches, is not my agenda. Okay. So if someone comes to me and says, I'm having this problem at work and I keep getting passed over at work and I do stuff and I do all the work and they know I do, and yet they gave this other guy the promotion. And okay, that might be what you think the problem is, but as a coach, you're really not about that promotion, right? This person feels undervalued, insignificant. And for them to use work as an example, listen, it's hard for us to compartment our lives these days. If it's happening at work, it's probably some kind of confirmation bias for what you feel at home. So how does the emotions come into that? Well, tell me more about work. What have you done? How, right? And what happens is my methodology is it's framed and it's structured, but it's not a template or a checklist. And the reason is, and this is one of the things why I choose coaching over therapy every day of the week, is because coaching is very focused on a specific outcome. Whereas therapy, not. I might find a good therapist who's like, let's get you feeling better. Let's get you crushing it in life. Let's go. They're few and far between in the therapy type of world. No offense to therapists. They do wonderful work for people who really need it. But coaching is just a bit more surgical in that, all right, let's talk about what's going on at work. So for me, all of my work starts with, okay, I understand that symptom. I understand that that's the effect. Let's work on the cause. Why do we think that's happening? And if we want to blame our boss and we want to blame our company and we want to blame the industry and we want to blame the economy, that's part of what we need to work on. That's all an external locus of control. You have no control over that stuff. So all you're doing when you put all your problems on someone or something else is you're banging your own head against a wall because you're not going to change those things. So the stuff that is within our control is us. And I've used the word response a couple of times already. Don't react to that. Let's respond to that. Let's understand what we have control over. So all my work starts fundamentally and foundationally with, who are you? Identity is what it shows up in my practice over and over and over because it's the journey that I personally went through. I lost my job. I lost my marriage almost simultaneously, took away 80% of my identity in a day. Right. I was no longer title and I was no longer equals true. Right. So now the two things that I really hung my identity on were taken away. They are out of my control. So what parts are in my control? And I start with identity work. And for me, your identity, at least the cornerstone of your identity, are your values, which I believe is what is important to you. And then your emotional needs, which is how you interact with the world and how you fulfill those values and honor those values, right? So that's the cornerstone. And then the feelings start to come into place when, all right, you told me this is a value of yours, and now you've told me that you made this choice that is in conflict or contrary to that value or in violation of that value. What's going on here? And almost every single time, the choice that I make being in conflict with that value or that need is because I have a limiting belief. I don't believe I deserve that. I'm afraid of that success. I'm afraid of that failure. And that's where it very gradually and very safely becomes a conversation about, how are you feeling? How are you interpreting the world that's around you?
Mm, yeah. Yeah. No, I can relate to that because I remember the first promotion I went for that I didn't get promoted, or And I actually was very half-hearted in the job at the time because I had an exit plan. And if I kind of I was working in as a professional firefighter, and it was sort of an awkward situation where I was the only on paper qualified person to take this new vacancy. And so technically it should have been handed to me,
Hmm.
but I already had an exit plan to leave the job and move overseas, but that wasn't happening in the next 3 months. And so
Right.
if I didn't apply for this job, the boss would have called me in like, going on? It's impossible that you didn't apply for the job. We just handed it to you. But because I was so half-hearted about it, some other people applied from outside of the area, and that there was two positions available, and they got the two positions, and I didn't. And the boss sort of called me in afterwards, and he said, "You want to have a talk about this? Why you didn't get it?" And I said, "That's fine. I know." And I just knew, like, heart wasn't in it. My
Yeah.
energy wasn't there, and so there was zero blame. I was kind of relieved because I knew in 6 months I was leaving anyway, and they would have had to call the position again, and they would have sort of like let me like it was the whole process,
Yeah.
and they avoided that, and I was kind of happy that it sort of went that way. But yeah, as soon as you haven't got your full energy in it, or there's something like that there, it's yeah, you lose the vibe, and it's like it's so easy to start blaming others that why you didn't get that job or that girlfriend or that whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Happened to me also 12 years old, 12, 13, kind of a pivotal age change right there, like moving basically from group to another group. So that's a transition. And I was testing for my brown belt. And blue belt to brown belt's a big deal. Like brown belt, really, you're only a brown belt that to indicate that you're training for your black belt. I mean, the only purpose of that belt is to prepare you for your black belt. And I went through that promotional exam, and I was the only blue belt testing for brown. Everybody else was junior to me. And so effectively for that promotional test, I was the star because top of the pyramid, right? And I failed that test. I failed that promotion. And I was shocked. I had no idea. And I took a few weeks off. And finally, my instructor called and said, are you coming back? Like, what's going on? I'm like, what's the point? Should I? I can't even pass a brown belt test. And he's like, you need to come see me. And that was one of the most memorable and powerful conversations of my life because he said, do you want to see your scores? They had score sheets and everything. And you kind of broke the exam down into categories. And I scored a perfect 50%. So technical ability, 10%. So you scored a 50. I'm like, well, so what's the other half? And he carried this with me for years now since. 50% of everything you do is attitude. He said, you walked into that test like had already passed, like it was yours, like it should just be given to you just because you spent the time as a blue belt. You didn't come into that test and fight for it and work for it. And you just went through the motions. So you're technically perfect. Stances, perfect, perfect. But here, he's like, you weren't even here. And I was like, yeah, probably right. But to learn that lesson as a young man, oh my gosh, how lucky was I? Because so many of us don't learn that lesson until we're 30, 40, 50, when we step back and say, how did I show up? How did I respond to that? And if I'm on autopilot, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get cruise control and you're going to get autopilot and you're going to get, at best, some kind of lackluster response. And that day forward, a couple things happened. He moved me out of the kids' class into the adults' class. So now I went from top of the heap to bottom of the heap, right? Because I was 84 pounds. Who the hell not, right? Like I was nothing. I was a skinny little 13-year-old kid. And now I was training with adults. So immediately the intensity went way up. And I just approached things differently. And I waited a full year before I tested again, which probably could have done it 3 months later, but we waited a full year. And that was one of the most rich years of my life at a very important time in my personal life, as well as my martial arts career. And the step change in my performance was absolutely exponential. Not only because I was training with grown adults, which means I had to really put in the effort to throw someone, to really put into the effort to break some kind of a hold or a grab. So it took a lot more physical effort, but it took mental effort as well because I was bottom of the heap and I had to earn all that all over again from scratch. And to take that attitude forward throughout my life, it has been absolutely a game changer. And people who know me on a regular basis will say when I show up, and presence is very important to me now.
Yeah. It's a great story. I can really relate to that because I did karate half-heartedly years ago. I basically, friends of ours, he and his sons were going to a karate class and their friend was the sensei. And so I sort of got encouraged to take our boys along. And so I just went along to be a good dad. I've never been into fighting or anything like that at all. You know, me in a boxing ring and I'm just not there. And so I went along and did the whole thing, got to blue belt. And then we had the big thing at the end, and brown belt. And I know watching the brown belts above me as they graded to brown belt, like there was three or four of them, and they were like full on guys. They were like to it, and I was only there being a good dad, just to support
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
sons going through the thing. And yeah, I
Yeah.
heart wasn't in it. I can tell you, but
And that's why we have those break points. You could be
yeah,
a recreational martial artist to a point, and then it's
yeah,
like, okay,
yeah,
decision time, because you're about to put yourself in harm's way and
yeah,
potentially others. The most dangerous person to fight, if you walk into a studio and you're going to do some sparring or something like that, the most dangerous person to fight is a green belt because they know enough technique to do something completely crazy and wild, and they have no control over what they're doing.
yeah,
So
yeah,
whenever I walk into a new studio, I'll spar with the black belts because I trust them. They are under control. They can dial it up. You know, these little micro degrees. Like I'm gonna fight. I'm not gonna mess around with these lower belts because they
yeah.
know just enough to be dangerous.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yeah, hear you there. Yeah. I'm curious through life and where you've got to, like this, if I asked you this question 10 years ago, you might give a different answer. But today in your life, what's your greatest fear?
Ooh, yeah. Knowing everything that I know about myself now, my fear day in, day out is a really healthy fear. I will say that. It's a healthy fear that I'm not going to get it all done. Because now, listen, you went through many iterations, but I have really distilled down my message, my brand, my values, my purpose in life. I've really narrowed it down, and it is this: everyone has value. It's a very powerful three words for me, and it drives everything I do personally and professionally. I've had a lot of experiences in my life where really wonderful people did not believe in their own value, and that breaks my heart. And it's a big part of what drives who I am and what I do. So now that I know that, it is my absolute mission to, convince all 8 billion of us that you have value. Everyone who's listening right now, if you haven't had someone in your life tell you that you have value, I am here right now telling you you have value. And if you don't think you do, it's only because you're measuring it wrong. It's only because you're using somebody else's metric for what's important and what's valuable. And one of the first things that I realized when I went through this process for myself and I defined those values and those needs and I came up with this clear identity, this very authentic identity, and then I started deleting all these adopted identities that I had. Like I had a specific identity at work and I had another identity in front of my daughter and a different identity for my son and a different identity with my friends and my nephew, right? All these identities. It was exhausting to try to be all those things. And then in so many situations, they were in conflict because like this identity with this person, but a certain, we're in the same, like that's exhausting. Once you have really dug in and clearly defined an authentic identity for yourself, then you have an opportunity to recognize your own value and say, holy crap, I do this thing better than anyone I've ever seen before. What, right? There's an Einstein quote. Oh my gosh, is it a goldfish or is it an elephant? I think it's a goldfish. If you judge a goldfish's value by its ability to climb a tree, it'll spend its whole life thinking that it's worthless. Oh my gosh. I probably just murdered that quote. So Google it, look it up, and read it, reread it. because that is what am finding over and over and over again with the men in my life and the men in our lives is we think we suck because we are measuring ourselves against someone else's standards and expectations. And I wasn't put on this earth to do this, right? Not everybody's a diver. Some people are skydivers. Not everybody's a fireman. Some people are police officers, right? Like you've to really understand yourself enough to know, this is me. This is my lane and this is where I shine.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you there. So I'm curious too, what do you up? What feeds you oxygen in life? Like what's spark for you?
Yeah, honestly, from those emotional needs, which is the same answer for everybody else who's listening. What fires you up is if you understand your emotional needs. My top two emotional needs. Here's my model. I use just the simple six emotional needs model, and my framework suggests that those top two emotional needs are like 51%. So 51% of what we do is to fulfill those top two needs. My top two needs: contribution, growth, knowledge. So what fires me up every day is this. Why you want to talk about someone who's in their lane. Coaching is absolutely the absolute perfect place for me to be for so many reasons. Everything just kind of fell into place. I didn't just pick up my cell phone one day and say, I think I could be a coach. It really is, a set of very unique skills that just happen to fit together perfectly. Not to ignore my need for contribution and my need for growth and knowledge feeds a very powerful framework, right? And it feeds a very powerful person in me because I want to contribute, which means I want you to be the best version of you possible. And I have this insatiable thirst for growth and knowledge. So I'm walking the talk while I'm encouraging people to come with me. And honestly, that is what gets me out of bed every day. I'll share another story with you. Reverend Andy Stanley is a fairly famous reverend here. He has a congregation in North Carolina. I saw him speak at a leadership event, actually. And he was talking about passion and purpose. And he was talking about how we define our purpose. And if we just did a pop quiz right now and asked everybody, hey, what's your purpose? Take through a minute and just write down what you think your purpose is and what you think your passions are. I can predict with pretty strong probability that everything on every one of those lists are going to be these fun, cool things. Well, my passion is horses. My passion is diving. I love this, my to do, right? It's all going to be about that stuff, what we enjoy. Reverend Stanley flipped me on my head and said, nope, you've got it all wrong. Your passion and your purpose in life is the thing that breaks your heart, because there aren't too many, and I'm going to pick on you, Doug, but there aren't too many occasions where somebody could call you at 2:30 in the morning and say, hey, you want to go dive? You'd be like, no, click. Like, no, no. But somebody called me at 2 o'clock in the morning and said, hey, Charles, I'm sorry to wake you up, but I've got this friend here. He's having some trouble. He's really thinking about hurting himself. He's making some choices that are going to flip his life upside down. You think I'm going to take that call, Doug?
Yep,
You
exactly.
bet your ass I'm going to take that call.
Yep.
So my challenge to the listeners here is think about your purpose and your passion in that way. Answer that question. What breaks your heart? And if you can answer that question, that is an absolutely inexhaustible source of enthusiasm and energy to go after it and just eradicate that thing from the world.
Yeah. No, I hear there. And as you were saying that, it just came through for me, and I know it. And it's part of the reason I have this podcast is my dad, he passed away 3 years ago at 92. And since then, I've had amazing revelations in deep meditations of his purpose on earth in my life. And it's one, I have a million times more now than when he was here. But when he was here, he drank a lot of alcohol. And every Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, when he came up the driveway, we would all hold our breath. And the best thing we could hope for is that when he opened that door, he would stagger into the bedroom and collapse on the bed and not wake till tomorrow morning. And yeah, exactly. Like, whoa, we just dodged that bullet. Now, he would never be physical, but it would be verbal. and the air would go. So, as a 9-year-old kid, I did not like the sound of dad driving in the driveway,
Yep.
and it bothered the heck out of me. When I got my first job at 15, by 16, I went to the dentist for the first time on my own money, and I said to him, I want you to make me a mouth guard so that I stop grinding my teeth in my sleep. I mean, so I don't want little boys and girls to grow up like that. I want every man on the planet to make one better decision a day.
Yep.
And if they make one better decision a day, in 3 months' time, their self esteem will be so much higher that they will walk in the door and their children will be happy to hear dad's car come in the driveway. And they'll be like, Dad's
Right.
home, run out and meet him. When real little, when I was 5, I did run out to meet dad on a Friday night because I was the youngest. Like I was a bit of a mistake there. There was a 6-year gap to me, and I had
Right.
4 older siblings that were all much closer, sort of. They were 12 years older than me, and
Right.
they'd been through the ringer. But at 5, I was still young and innocent and
Eve.
green,
Yep.
and I would run out because on Friday night, dad got paid, so he would stop at the shop on the way home drunk, and he'd buy chocolates and soft drink. We'd call soft for us,
Right.
and
Yep.
would forget, and he'd go, oh, and he at that point he'd still be very happy, and he'd say, hop in the car. So I would hop in the car with him. I'd be up in the front seat, and we would drive half a mile down the street to the corner store, and he'd just let me go. You pick an ice cream for everybody, and you go to the fridge and get some soda, and I would get it all, and off we go. At 5, that all was working fine. And my dad was 6 foot tall, but mum was 4 foot 10. But
Mm.
she had Italian in her, and she didn't let her height like restrict her from, if dad, when he walked in the door drunk, that's when it started, like this big verbal thing. We're doing spending all our money at the pub, because to go and clean people's houses through the day, like to get extra cash so we could eat. And, because we drinking and, oh, yeah. And so when you're describing that, so 2 o'clock in the morning, I get a phone call and someone's got shit going down because someone, yeah, like, I'm okay, what's it? I mean, I'm there, like, I'll jump and go like all day. But yeah, my buddies go scuba diving, like, piss off. Yeah.
Well, we can even take your mission, and I'll show you how that internal kind of thing, applying those better decisions is like the Matrix, creates your reality, right? So our defined by our choices, right? And our choices are defined by what we believe, and what we believe is defined by what we think, and what we think is defined, right? So it's this cascading effect, and it all starts inside of us. So I'm with you 10,000%. If you can change the way that you think about yourself, and the way you feel about yourself, and the way you believe, and the things that you believe about yourself, and you can make those choices, yes, self-esteem, confidence. Like, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but there's literally entire categories of coaching. Hire me and I'll help you, with esteem. I'll help you with your confidence. I'll help you own the boardroom. I'll help you make more sales because I'm going to do this stuff. That is painting over rust, because the root cause of your low confidence and your low self-esteem isn't something that can be fixed with a trick or a hack. You don't have low self-esteem because, the way your hair looks. That's not it. You have deep-seated beliefs that formed when you were a 5-year-old or 8-year-old boy that make you think that there's something wrong with you. Okay. So getting to the root of that is one thing, but when you believe, when you think differently about yourself, and you speak differently to yourself, and you make different choices, you literally can change the landscape of your life. And you do that one decision at a time. And I am actually walking, talking, living proof of that, because not too distant past, again, I was a zombie. I was on autopilot. I wasn't present. I didn't know anything. I wasn't doing anything that actually fulfilled me. I was doing the stuff that I thought I needed to do. But through, this is how I say, when it comes down to a decision, whatever choice you have to make, which we make thousands of a day, but one of those choices, whether there's 2 of them or 12 of them, one of those choices is more in alignment with your values. It may not be perfect. I don't live in a fantasy world. I live in the real world, just like you guys. But one of those choices is more in alignment with your values. that's the right choice for so many reasons. But if you make a choice that's in alignment with your value and then another and another, feeds into my definition of happiness, right? So happiness to me is a very simple, very right. Ultimately, I'm a nerdy nuke, and I want to break it down into math. I want to make it quantitative. Happiness equals honors minus violations. How many things in my life honor me? How many things in my life violate me? And I promise you, very simple math here, folks. If there's more things in your life that violate you, if you're with a partner who nags at you, who doesn't support you, who tells you you're worthless, you're working at a job that you hate for a boss who takes you for granted, and you haven't been to the dojo in 12 years, and you lost touch with all your friends, and you don't even play softball, and you're not eating healthy, you're not feeling good about yourself or about your life. And that's the downward spiral. Because of all those violations, you feel like crap about yourself. It's confirmation bias. Well, I don't feel very good about myself. Well, you shouldn't because you're a piece of crap. So make crappy again tomorrow and let's keep this going. If you want to change the tide, if you want to shift the tide, it takes time, gentlemen. You've got to stop this negative momentum in this negative direction, and then you've got to get some momentum going in the other direction. But it starts just as you described, Doug, one decision at a time, one choice at a time. I did it. And if I did it once, I can do it again. Maybe tomorrow I'll do it twice, right?
Mm.
And you just start, and you can do this in a very safe way. One of the things that's so important to me to share with guys who are thinking about coaching, who are reading some self-help, listen, guys, you don't have to flip your entire life upside down to do this. And if you're talking to a coach or you're listening to advice that says the only way to do this is to just wipe the table and start over, they don't know what they're talking about. Stop, get away. What it really is look inside, figure out what really matters to you, and start making choices that align with that. And then watch your entire world change around that.
Yeah. Yeah, because I have intuition as there's an in the because I love anything to do with the unseen realm. Anything we can't touch, see, feel, it's there. And I don't have a close affiliation with it. I don't see things, I don't hear voices, but I know it's there. And I just see that there is a benevolent force, and it's whatever you want to call that benevolent force that likes us, and it's there to help us. And it's trying to whisper in our ear, it's trying to do whatever it can to get a message to us. And you might be feeling like a piece of crap, and you drive on home every day, you go past a gym and you look at that gym, and something catches your eye every time, and you don't even think about going in
Right?
there, but you just like, oh, there's that gym. And on the 51st time, like, I used to go to the gym 20 years ago.
Yep.
And next this benevolent force, and every time you go past the gym, they're trying to get you to. And it's not like they want you to be Charles Atlas and fit and a bodybuilder. They just want you to get some self-esteem, or or be a bit more physically healthy, but so that because we need you on this planet for another 45 years yet. And if you go in there and start, twice you can do something, it's going to add 5 years to your life because whatever. And going to the gym, that's just like, I'm not even suggesting people need to go to the gym. It's just something that's there. We different things. And if we're just open to it, and so finally we go in there, and 2 weeks after we've been going in there, we start to walk like half an taller because we just feel a little bit better. And we're like, wow, I should have come here years ago. This is great. And then that leads
Yep.
to something else. And then they start talking to someone, and that person says, they see a person eating some sort of thing that's not even actually food, and they're putting it in their mouth and
Right.
digesting it. And they're like, have you ever thought about trying something else? And then 6 months later, they're putting different things in their mouth, and their brains responding differently, and their intuition's heightened, and they're more open to things. Because I know for me, 14 years ago, I had an epiphany with food, and I radically changed what I was eating. I used to say I changed my diet, but the word diet infers a short time period. I stopped, changed radically what I was eating long term, like still to today. Within a couple of months, my whole world changed. My view of the world and how I saw everything changed. And I think it was just, like frequency. My body has a frequency, and they weren't compatible. And when I changed the food I was putting in my mouth, it more aligned with the frequency my body needed. And therefore, I believe I was able to interpret the frequency of the unseen realm a little bit better each day.
Right.
Like not amazingly, there was like I'm not clairvoyant. I don't see all these amazing
Nice.
visions or like. And I know people. I've got good friends that do, and I like sometimes I'm envious of them. Sometimes I'm not. But like intuition my way, and it comes how it comes for me. But yeah, as we open these little bits and we start to listen and follow it, it just snowball. It's the exponential curve. And
Mhm.
yeah,
Have you ever studied anything about how your macrobiome is actually a center of intelligence in our bodies?
yes. I don't
Okay.
have a understanding where I could teach anyone about it, but I've heard it many,
Okay.
many times. Yeah.
Yep. Just an for you to explore because there is more and more research and more studies that are, independent and peer reviewed that say, holy crap, there's a lot to this. They're literally macroorganisms in our bodies, and there's more of them in our body than there are cells, our own DNA in our body. Okay, so they are. So to think that that macrobiome doesn't have an influence on your mood, your attitude, your thoughts, your cravings, they absolutely do. So, this plug for any particular company, but a company called Viome, right? They'll do blood work and they'll also do other work, and they will measure your macrobiome and say, whoa, this is why you don't feel well. This is why you have allergies. This is why you can't sleep. This is why you are so high anxiety, because they'll look at your macrobiome, compare it to, your genealogy and all that kind of stuff and say, you want to be this way. Our macrobiome is something that we actually inherit from our mother, right? The first seed, think about it kind of like starter, right? Our mom provides that macrobiome starter for that macrobiome during gestation. Sorry. And so when we're born, we're feeding it. And listen, this is how the story of the two wolves started. Whichever macrobiome you feed is the one that grows. So if all you do is eat sugar and carbohydrates, that is the macrobiome that you are feeding. And that is very toxic. Literally, from a pH level, it becomes toxic within your own body. It loves viruses and bacteria, so it makes a wonderful home from them. So guess what? You are sick all the time. But when you feed the good macrobiome, and it's not just yogurt, let's be clear about that. It's for you. So I'm not obviously not prescribing a particular menu for anyone. But for me, it was really some surprising items. And wildly, it's items that I loved naturally. And for whatever reason, I stopped eating. Blueberries are like my two flavors ever, right? And so blueberries, like my bag from Viome, and they're like, bro, you need a half a cup of wild blueberries every day. Like, see this year that you need this. Okay, that's not break my heart. You need to stay away from this thing because you have way too much of this, strain. Okay, leveling out my macrobiome. Again, you want to talk about control of my state. When an input comes in, am I super reactionary? Am I constantly on edge? Or am I able to assess that for myself and then make my own choice on how I want to respond to that? And getting that squared away, getting my physical body squared away, gives my intuition and my mind an opportunity to actually, okay, now you hear me, because there isn't all this white noise from everything that's not supposed to be here.
Yeah. It's like taking your fingers out of your ears. You can hear
Yeah.
like it's just like, oh, okay. I just the lips moving before. Now I understand what you're
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah. Once I onto that changing, what my mouth regime, about a year after that, I read a book. They're not that they're so prevalent anymore, but there was this series of books like, and they were yellow and black for dummies, all
Okay.
different things for dummies. And this was the acid alkaline diet for dummies. And it was very interesting. And it was written by a former emergency room nurse. So she'd seen, 20 plus
Yeah.
lots of people coming into the ER with accident related, like sick, and
Right.
and it was very interesting. Like most things in our modern world cause our bodies to be acid. So like cigarette smoke, fear, worry, anxiety, alcohol, things like that just make they swing you to an
Sugar.
acidic state. And there's nothing wrong with acid in our bodies, but it's got to be balanced.
Right.
And if we have too much alkaline, it's bad too. But in this book, it promoted that you need to find alkaline foods and add them to your consumption simply because of the modern world to
Right.
counteract
Yep.
the stress and all those things that cause the acidic. And it was very, very interesting. Some foods you put in your mouth that are alkaline before you put them in your mouth, some of them turn acidic and vice versa. Some very acidic foods like citrus, it's very acidic. Once it goes in our mouth and gets digested and goes through our system, it turns alkaline. But not everything does that. Some things that
Right.
are, most things stay what they are, but some things go opposite. So you're thinking, oh, I've got too much acid in my diet. Oh, I'm going to eat an orange or a lemon. And you're like, hang on, there's obviously more acid. But
Yeah.
when it's does its inside our bodies, it converts and it becomes alkaline. And that I found that very interesting because some diseases and things like that thrive like it's like putting petrol on a fire. Um,
Absolutely.
if once you this acid into your body, it's just like making these diseases grow and thrive in us, and taking the acid away and balancing out the alkaline state. It's just now all that petrol away, and the fire's just burning on its own. We're not feeding it anymore, and we now have potential to extinguish the fire and stop that
And
thing.
and the human body is so good at hiding disease
Hmm.
that most of us are suffering without even knowing. Like
Hmm.
our body's designed to just keep swimming, so we will shoot ourselves in the foot by masking the symptoms and finding a workaround. And the problem with that is instead of functioning the way that we're supposed to, our system is kind of right obvious in the physical world. Like I'm this knee in high school, so now my hip hurts. Wait a minute, what? Compensating. So my other hip hurts because I hurt my knee. Right. Okay, that we can conceptualize. Same thing happens inside. So you have this really messed up macrobiome, or you have this just very, very acidic in your body. Your body's going to compensate. And how is it going to do that? Well, that kind of depends. But how about you don't sleep for the next 3 days?
Yep.
Let's see how you do it, right? And that's the price you pay for that. And those are all signs that, hey, wait a minute, I shouldn't need anything. Go to sleep. Like we're designed to sleep. It's a very natural thing. I should be able to sleep. If you can't sleep, and I don't mean to call anyone out, I'm not trying to shame anyone, but if your life has gotten to a point where you need aids to help you sleep, something's not right because that's one of the most natural things we do. And I will tell you that it's a sign that there's something else. And, we have a very specific kind of medical community here in the States, right? And they their shots about just treating the symptoms and not really spending time getting to the root cause. There's a very large movement of very wonderful and competent doctors that are really starting to take a step back, looking at us holistically and saying, wait, instead of me prescribing this for that heartburn, let's look at what's really causing this. And so, anyway,
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah. Changing what I put in my mouth was the beginning of my intuitive journey. It was important for me. It's a real basic sort of foundation, I think. Yeah, no, that's yeah. Glad I haven't had this conversation in a while during a podcast, and it's a great reminder for me and for the men listening in that that is a real good way to start, and it's very, very important. It's and our bodies are quite resilient. Once we start to get this stuff back into some sort of balance, our bodies start to change and compensate, and sort out the disease will start to leave our
yep,
bodies, and at the clarity comes. And earlier the term frequency, and like an incredibly powerful microscope and started to look at our physical bodies or look at the chair we're sitting on. There's innumerable around there of energy. It really looks like, and it's there,
right,
and those things are spinning around, and together and in their different forms. We start to come in alignment with that, and we've now got like a much more orderly frequency of everything happening in there, and everything's more harmonious and in balance, and it flows better, and everything's just aligning better. So, but when
Right.
we can do add chaos into that body structure with stress, anxiety,
Mhm. Mhm.
and poor choices of what we're putting in our mouth. And yeah,
Well, and for me, so this is kind of the beginning stages of a lot of my coaching, which is, I'm what food I eat, and I'm going to make these choices, and it makes a physical change in your body. It obviously it changes that because food is more than just what tastes good, right? So we know that. But there's also a really subtle but incredibly powerful and important message that makes its way to your subconscious, which is we matter. We're important. We're worthy. We deserve this healthy food over this. And that's what's so important to me when I go through this process of helping people. This is why I say, no offense to anyone who does this specifically, but this is why my clients come to me and say, I need help with my confidence. And I go, okay, let's put away. Let's get started with identity and purpose. Okay, I need help with self-esteem. Okay, let's put aside. Let's get started with identity and purpose. I need help, just to be present with my kids. Okay, let's put aside identity and purpose. And the reason I say that is if I try to help you solve any of those symptoms without fixing the foundation first, it's a waste of time. Right? I've already said it. Painting over rust, use whatever analogy you want. Because when you have a clear sense of who you are, what your value is, what's important to you, and you start to feed that and you start to believe that, guess what happens to the self-esteem problems, the confidence problems, the presence problems, the attention? Those are effects, those are indicators that there's a deeper problem. So when we fix that problem at that level, it's a little bit of time. I'm so glad that this is working out for you. So you want to dig into that confidence stuff? I don't have any confidence stuff, right? Oh my gosh, like I wasn't paying attention, but guess what? I know my value, I know my worth now. So I'm not afraid to speak up and share my ideas. I'm not afraid to say no. Like that's going to break someone's heart if I say no to them. Actually, wait a minute. Now that I think about it, just living in alignment with my values, that's okay. We as men have a really hard time of taking care of ourselves, putting ourselves first. Very strong messages out there that good men, thanks to the movies and all the rom-coms and everything, good men, what do? They fall on their swords. They do whatever she wants. They, fashion on that specifically, but obviously we talked about a good portion of my training and my certification is in no more Mr. Nice Guy stuff. And nice guy stuff is really rooted in this idea that if I do this for someone else, then they'll reciprocate, right? And they don't always reciprocate. So one of the hardest habits that we as men need to break is it's okay for me to have needs, number one. And number two, I really should fulfill those needs first so that I can better care for the people in my life. Taking care of myself is not a selfish act. Taking care of myself is a very loving act. And not just love for me, but love for my children and love for the people who count on me. Because the better I take care of myself, boom, the better version of me is there to do for them.
yeah, absolutely. No, I hear you on that. That's yeah, and makes everything the world's just a better place everywhere. Your neighbors are happy to see you. They're waving
Yeah.
to you when you're driving in or out the driveway. They're just
Yeah.
yeah, Europe to be around. And rather than, oh, not him again. Like,
Yeah. Here he comes.
he's coming around. Oh, how get it? Yeah. Or it's, oh, he's coming around. Like, this is, yeah, it's the same person, just different stuff going around. And yeah, no, I hear there. All right. So I've got one last question for you.
Okay.
And it's a little bit of a big question. If you want to take a sec to go through it, that's fine. Or you might just whip it straight out there. But if you're connected to all 8.2 billion people on the planet right now, and you knew they wouldn't judge, blame, or shame you for anything that you said, what would you say to them, Charles?
Kind of feel like I'm cheating, but I already said it. You have value. And if you don't see what that value is, then you need to take the time to figure out what it is. Find someone to help you, but you, without question, have value. And life is about discovering that value and then sharing that. Don't adopt someone else's life, someone else's goals. You're going to win prizes that you don't want. You have value. And if you don't believe that that's true, you need to start spending some time exploring that.
I love that. You're going to win a prize that you don't want. And that is really true because, yeah, you can get esteem or a job or a partner or something that's like, this I really want. And you mightn't even realize that at first. At first, it might seem exciting.
Right.
And yeah.
Well, listen, when young, we trust adults. No reason not to. They're taking care of us. We're dependent on them. And they told us, good job. This is the bad job. This is the safe job. This is the risky job. You should do this. Do this. Good at that. I really love that. I feel alive when I do that. Yeah. But I want to do that. You want to do this.
Yeah.
And a lot of us lay down those dreams and lay down those ideas and lay down that passion and that purpose for someone else's version of safety. This is a very important realization. The people who love and care about us the most, they don't want us to be happy.
Yeah.
They want us to be safe.
Yes. Yeah.
And not even safe the way we define it.
Yeah.
But my father's a Navy veteran also. He served on submarines also. But I promise you, my mother did not approve of my decision to join the Navy. No. Get here in town. That's what's smart, right? Go to the machine shop and make ball bearings. That's a forever job, right? You really got to step back and follow your heart. And some of this, well, I don't know. I don't know what I want. Yep, exactly. They don't come with a manual. You got to do this kind of work.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to put your contact details and stuff like that in the show notes. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you wanted to mention before we wind up?
Oh my gosh. I think if I start, we're going to end up with another episode. So maybe we'll do that, right? Maybe we'll come back with another episode. I will say though, I do have a really great assessment. I know you're going to put the link in there on my website. I have a really great assessment. It's something that I wrote and created myself. So and again, it's based on a lot of research. It's kind of blasting out. And depending on whether you want to assess your personal life, your professional life, or your kind of peak performance assessments there you can take, and I will help you understand kind of where you are in the journey and then flood you with free tools to do exactly what I just promised, which is show you where your value is. So that's a really great carrot waiting for you if you decide to connect with me and land on my website. But it's a really great tool.
Excellent. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. So yeah, so the show notes to Charles's website where you can click in, and I'm sure they'll find that in there quite easily. That's great. Thanks for the info. I'm sure the men listening have got some gold nuggets to take away today and act on in whatever way they choose. Thank you.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. Cheers.
Well, we're at the end of another thought-provoking episode. Remember to subscribe so you'll be alerted to new episodes. I want to say thank you to the men who are joining me on this journey of intuitive development. I truly hope our time together has expanded your reality and reinforced trust in your ever-reliable gut feeling. Embrace your intuition. It will not lead you astray. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and trust your gut.